Hi, so my husband Jacob, 30 male, and I, 27 female, got married about a week ago, and yesterday we were supposed to leave for our honeymoon. But I ended up taking a flight to someplace else altogether because his younger sister showed up at the airport, and apparently Jacob was in on this whole time and had actually invited her to come along with us. For context, his sister Angie, 26, recently went through a terrible divorce with her ex-husband and has been very torn up about it for the past couple of months. Angie and her ex had been high school sweethearts and got married as soon as they could. They spent several beautiful years together until about a year ago when Angie found out that he had been having an affair for months with one of his co-workers. She tried to make it work with him even after that, but after several sessions of marriage counseling, her ex was the one who filed for divorce because he claimed that he just couldn't do this anymore. She begged him to stay, but in spite of that, he left and they got divorced. She received everything in the divorce, the house, the cars, the hefty settlement, but even that wasn't enough for her because she wanted her marriage to stay intact and didn't care about anything else. I thought it was really sad, and I honestly felt bad for her because she was a sweet person and she didn't deserve it. And to be honest, nobody deserves to live like that, and I had witnessed firsthand how depressed she was in the months following the divorce. I wanted to help her out, but all I could offer her were words of consolation. I wanted to involve her in the wedding so that she would stay busy and distracted, but Jacob told me that he didn't think it was such a good idea because being part of a wedding like ours would just remind her that her own marriage had fallen apart. And he made a good point, so I decided to only stick to checking up on her once in a while. Angie and I were never close friends, but we got along well. In fact, I think I could say that about most of Jacob's family. I wouldn't say that I was close to any of them, but we got along well, and I never had a problem with any of them so far. But then, a day after my wedding, my mother-in-law, Nora, 55 female, called me up and said that she wanted me to invite Angie to accompany us on our honeymoon. Jacob and I had been planning for this for a really long time, and I think I had been more excited about the honeymoon than the wedding, if I'm being really honest. I love traveling, and so does Jacob, and we love mountain ranges in particular, so we had a whole tour of the Alps planned. We had taken about 3 weeks off from work, and we have been really looking forward to this ever since we planned it. Now, I did feel bad for Angie, and I would have been willing to do whatever it took to cheer her up, except for this. Nora told me that even Angie loved to travel, and she believed that going on a trip with us would help her with the pain. But Angie wouldn't be willing to come along unless I invited her personally, so she wanted me to ask her and make it seem like I wanted her to come along. But truth be told, I didn't want her to come with us. For starters, this was supposed to be our honeymoon, and I don't think it's appropriate for family to accompany the newlyweds on their honeymoon. And secondly, I was really looking forward to this since the weeks leading up to the wedding had been really busy and hectic for both of us. Jacob and I had specifically taken time off so we could travel and have some quality time with just each other. It didn't seem fair for Nora to ask me to give all that up for the sake of Angie's happiness. So, with a heavy heart, I had to tell Nora that I couldn't do so because it wouldn't be fair to either of us. I expected her to understand that this was supposed to be our honeymoon, and I didn't want Angie tagging along. She didn't fight with me at the time, but tried to convince me that this could do her a world of good, and I would be doing them all a huge favor by inviting her to come with us. She told me that she was going to cover the cost of Angie's traveling with us, and I didn't even have to worry about the money. All that I had to do was invite her and be there for her. She was pushing it really hard, but even then I stood my ground and I firmly declined it because it was not fair to either of us. I could understand that it was difficult for her to deal with a divorce, but she couldn't just tag along with us and expect us to give up our honeymoon just so we could cheer her up. Besides, it wasn't even Angie trying to convince me to let her come along. Nora believed that it would be good for her to travel with us. Had Angie approached me, I might have even considered saying yes. But I didn't think that she wanted to come along with us either, because she hadn't said anything of the sort, and even when I had mentioned the honeymoon to her, she hadn't shown any interest in wanting to come with us, and just told me to have fun. That was it. So after a few minutes of conversation and arguing, Nora decided to drop it, and it didn't come up after that. After that conversation, I spoke to Jacob about what his mother had said, but strangely enough, he didn't have any reaction to it. He just asked me what I had told her, and I told him that I had said no. When I said that, he just grunted, and that was it. No further discussion about it. In hindsight, I probably should have read more into it, but at the time I was just too excited to start packing for our honeymoon, so I didn't pay much mind to his reaction. In the week between the wedding and the honeymoon, we were busy at work because we were trying to wrap everything up before we left. So we didn't have a chance to meet anybody from his family. And nobody tried to get in touch with us either. Jacob and I would talk about the honeymoon and our trip occasionally whenever we were at home this last week. But he didn't say a single word about what he had been planning until the very last minute. I had no idea that he had invited Angie to come along with us, and I only found out when we were at the airport and Angie and Nora showed up. Yesterday, Jacob and I left about 3 hours before our flight was scheduled at the airport. While we were waiting outside and taking our bags out of the cabs, I suddenly noticed Angie and Nora approaching us. I tried to give everybody involved the benefit of the doubt until I noticed that Angie had her bags with her. I knew then that she was definitely not here to just say goodbye to us or drop us off. She yelled, "Surprise!" really loudly and then hugged me when she was close enough, but I was still trying to process what was going on, because I think I had been very clear about my feelings on this with both Jacob and his mother. However, despite what I had said, here she was, seemingly ready to accompany us on our honeymoon. When Angie realized that I looked confused and not happy when I saw her, her smile faded, and she asked me if I was not happy to see her. I didn't even know what to say, so I just turned to Jacob for an explanation. I wanted him to tell me that he had no idea about any of this, and that Nora was the one who was responsible for this. But instead, he told me that after I had informed him about the phone call and the conversation that I had with Nora the other day, he couldn't help but think about how nice it would be for Angie to come with us on the trip and have a good time to distract her. The reason he had not reacted that day was that he had gone behind my back a couple of hours later and told Angie that apparently I was the one who had suggested this idea and invited her to come with us on the trip to surprise me. And he was right about one thing. I was definitely surprised, but not in a good way. I thought it was sneaky and selfish of him to go behind my back to the one thing that I had told him that I didn't want. I like Angie, like I said. She's a really nice person. I like her. But I like a lot of people. I'm not going to take them all with me on my honeymoon just because it would be a nice thing to do. I don't have to do things just because it's a sweet thing to do, especially when it comes to something as intimate and special as a honeymoon. After Jacob told me that this was his idea and he was the one who had invited her to come along with us, I sort of snapped at him right in front of Angie and his mother and told him that this was simply unacceptable. I knew that Angie would feel bad about it, but that was the thing on my mind at that moment. I told him that he had gone behind my back and I couldn't forgive him for that, because it had barely even been a week into our marriage and he was already being sneaky and lying to me. He tried to pass this off as something really small and insignificant, but he thought I had been planning for this honeymoon for ages and I had made it very clear to him that I was really looking forward to this. Even on the day that I had told him about the suggestion that Nora had made and that I didn't like the idea of asking Angie to come along just because she was depressed, I think I had been very clear about my feelings on this. So this was not petty or insignificant in the slightest to me. I felt like he had betrayed me and I was extremely upset. But he simply refused to look at it like that. And he said that I was making a bigger deal out of it than was necessary and completely blowing this out of proportion. He told me that Angie would be paying for herself. She would stay in a separate room and she would only join us for certain activities, but we wouldn't be together all the time. However, that was not enough for me because at the end of the day, she was still going to be accompanying us on our honeymoon. And I don't know about everybody else, but I really think that's weird. Had this been any other trip, like a normal weekend trip, I don't think I would have had a problem. But asking my sister-in-law to come with me on my honeymoon was where I drew the line. After a bit of fighting and arguing, I decided that I had had enough. And since Jacob refused to take accountability and accept that he had done something messed up, I thought that I was better off going away on my own. I had already taken 3 weeks off from work and I wasn't going to let that go to waste. So I dropped the argument, went inside the airport after telling him not to follow me. But of course he did follow me. However, I didn't want him around at that particular point in time, so I actually had to yell at him to stop following me around and said that I didn't want him anywhere near me or I really would report him for harassment. That stopped him from coming after me, but I could tell from his face that he was really upset and hurt by what I said. I didn't care, because I was pissed off, and I just wanted to be away from him. So once I had yelled at him and he had stopped following me, I decided to get myself a ticket, hopped onto the next flight to Miami. I was really lucky because it didn't require me to wait for long, and I was on the flight before Jacob even had a chance to change his mind about following me. Once I landed in Miami, I decided to turn on my phone and check for texts, and I realized that my inbox was full of messages from Jacob, Angie, and Nora. All of them seemed to be really apologetic for whatever had happened, but the only apology that really stood out was the one that I received from Angie. She told me that when a few days ago Jacob had visited her and told her that I had been suggesting that she accompany us on our honeymoon, she could barely even believe it. Apparently, she was even about to ask me if I was actually okay with it because she didn't want to be intruding. But Jacob was the one who told her not to ask me because he wanted it to be a surprise for me. He had laid it on thick and made her believe that this was my idea. But after our fight at the airport, it had become clear to her that this was all planned by her mother and her brother, and she said that she was sorry on their behalf because what they had done was really stupid, and she didn't blame me for reacting the way that I did, because if she was in my place, she probably would have done the same thing. Her apology seemed genuine, and I told her that it was okay. I could understand that she was going through something really difficult, and she wasn't even involved in any of this, so I forgave her. But with Jacob and Nora, it was a different story altogether. Jacob was apologizing, but he was also trying hard to make me seem like the bad guy here. And the same applied to Nora as well. They were trying to push me into believing that they only had good intentions and didn't think that I would get so upset about this. They claimed that they had believed that I would eventually be okay with this because I always acted like I liked Angie. And I do. I really like her. But like I said, that doesn't mean that I want her around on my honeymoon. And if they can't accept it, then I don't know what to tell them. Now, I know for a fact that I'm not in the wrong here, but I still kind of feel bad. And it doesn't help that ever since I landed here, I have been fighting with Jacob non-stop. It's because he just doesn't want to accept that he messed up by going behind my back and that this was not the right thing to do. I understand and I really respect the fact that he loves his family so much and is willing to make sacrifices for them. But I think it's extremely unfair to expect me to make the same sacrifices for his family. And not to mention, I'm his family as well now, and he owes me certain things. It just feels like my happiness doesn't mean as much to him as his family's, and it feels really petty to make it seem like a competition, but that's how it appears. If he actually valued my happiness as much as he values his sister's, maybe he wouldn't have gone behind my back and done the one thing that I asked him not to do. We have been fighting and it's been really bad because we've just been married for a week and we've gotten off on the wrong foot already. We've been together for almost 7 years before this and I feel like crap right now because something like this has never happened before. We have always had a relatively normal relationship. And yes, of course, like any other couple, we have also had fights, but none of this magnitude, and I just don't know how to deal with this. He insists that his heart was in the right place and that I really need to understand that. He claims that while having Angie accompany us on the honeymoon wasn't going to ruin anything for me, it would have meant a great deal to her and maybe even saved her from getting worse down the road. And I can't explain to him that having Angie accompany us on our honeymoon would have kind of ruined it for me without sounding like a really terrible person and the kind of wife who wants to separate her husband from her family. But I promise you guys, that's not the case. I know logically I am not the bad guy here, but all the fighting with my husband has made me feel like I'm losing my mind and I have absolutely no idea how to go ahead. AITA for leaving my husband behind at the airport and cancelling our honeymoon when I realized that he had invited his sister to accompany us on our trip. Update 1. So, I'm still in Miami and I've been traveling a lot. This is my first time here, and a lot of you guys suggested a couple of places that I should go see, and I have been doing exactly that to take my mind off of things. I still haven't been able to sort things out with my husband because Jacob is being very stubborn. He is sticking to whatever he believes, and he honestly thinks that having Angie be with us on the honeymoon wouldn't have been any different. He is so convinced of it that it took me all the comments here to make me realize that I wasn't going crazy and that he was being unreasonable. I can't understand why he doesn't get it when even Angie herself has acknowledged that it would have been weird. He has been texting me, but I have just given up on trying to explain things to him. I had been arguing for a while, but I completely wasted the last few days that I've been here, staying in my hotel room and arguing with him. I have spent enough of my time trying to make him see sense, but I can't help him if he refuses to acknowledge the obvious. The worst part of this is that I can't even fully enjoy myself because in the back of my mind, I keep thinking about Jacob and what I'm going to say to him when I go back. I can't avoid him forever, and we are literally married, so it's not even like we can just break up and be done with it. My entire existence feels heavy, and I don't know, I just feel like everything is going wrong right now. I have talked to my parents about this, but they don't really know what to do either. They only advised me to do whatever I felt was right, and they would be supportive of it. And I guess that's kind of helpful, knowing that they will be on my side no matter what. But I can't help feeling like everything is falling apart. And the fact that it's been less than even a month since our wedding is what makes everything so much, much harder to deal with. I know it's really easy for people to just tell me that this is a huge red flag and I should leave my husband, get divorced, be done with it. But in reality, it's not that easy, and I'm not even talking about the legal process of divorce. I'm talking about the emotional and mental toll it takes. I don't know what I'm going to do, full disclosure. I just have absolutely no idea, and I don't even know what to expect. Update 2. I returned from Miami a couple of days ago, and I don't know, things have not been great so far. The day that I came back, I returned to an empty home because Jacob was not here. I spent 3 weeks in Miami, and after 2.5 weeks, he stopped texting me. Even the last few messages that he sent me he was still insisting that he did not have bad intentions and that I needed to reconsider whatever I was doing. When I came back home, I decided to finally respond to him and told him that I was back here. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just felt like I had to tell him because then at least something would happen. I couldn't stand the uncertainty of not knowing what the future holds, and I felt like I just had to talk to him. So the day that I told him that I was back here, he texted me back saying that he would come over the next day and we could talk. I thought that it was a good sign and we would finally get somewhere. But when he came over the next day, we were still stuck talking about the same things. We were still fighting about who was overreacting and who was in the wrong. He continued to say that I shouldn't have reacted the way that I did in front of Angie and made such a big deal out of this because I should have just trusted him since he would never do anything to jeopardize our relationship. But the fact that I was against something as silly as Angie joining us for our honeymoon, which was nothing but a glorified vacation, made him feel like I was being a little too oversensitive and that I had no need to act so crazy about it. I thought that it was really unfair. I had already told him before how I felt about Angie joining us, but he had completely overlooked it. More than Angie being a part of our honeymoon, I had a problem with him going behind my back and lying to me. In fact, not only lied to me, but he also lied about me. When he told Angie that it was my suggestion that she join us for our honeymoon. I would love for her to be happy, but not at the cost of my own happiness, and I don't think there's anything selfish or cruel about it, like the way he was trying to portray it. If anything, he was the one being selfish because he couldn't be bothered to think about my feelings and only cared about being the good guy for his family, but not for me. It made me feel like he was telling me I was not worth it, and that was a really sucky feeling. On top of that, there was the fact that he was currently living in a hotel because he said that he hadn't even left after he found out that I had taken off without him. He told me that after I stopped responding to his messages, he had half a mind to go ahead and file for a divorce because he thought I was taking things too far. I thought this attitude was uncalled for because he was the one who screwed up. We argued a lot, and to sum things up, there was absolutely no improvement in our situation. He keeps saying that I don't have a sibling, which is why I don't understand why this is so important to him. And all right, maybe that's true. I'll never personally understand what it's like to have a sibling and care for them so much. But you know what? There are several people in the comments of this post who did have siblings, and they told me that this was taking things too far. So yeah, maybe he is the one in the wrong. And he's just trying to gaslight me into believing that I'm the one who's overreacting. Whatever the case, I'm not falling for any of it. I have made up my mind that if he doesn't apologize to me soon, then I might just have to talk to my lawyer and prepare for a divorce. If he does apologize, that's a different story. I have been thinking about marriage counseling, but that's only if he approaches me within the next few days and tells me that he is sorry about everything. Right now, it seems really unlikely. Just by the way, he and Nora are the only people who think what he did was completely fine, and I'm the one who is taking it too hard for no reason. But Angie, the person who they are fighting so hard for, is actually on my side on this. She has reached out to me several times to let me know that she has been trying to explain this to both Nora and Jacob and tell them that what they did was backhanded and it was just not cool. But they're not even willing to listen to her, which just goes to show that it's more important for them to be right, even more than doing the right thing. I totally don't even know what to think anymore because this situation is just ridiculous. I thought that I had married a sensible, amazing man, but right now I don't feel that this is the same person that I had married. I have a lot of conflicting feelings, and talking about it here helps me make sense of it, even if it's just a little. I just don't want anything apart from a resolution to this. It's getting really tiring now, and I can't continue to deal with this drama all the time. Update 3. Hi folks. So this update is long overdue now. I haven't posted anything here for the last couple of months because I have been going through a terrible divorce. I did decide to give Jacob a chance and suggested marriage counseling. A couple of days after my last update here, he had expressed that he wanted to work on our marriage and he didn't want to give up yet. Jacob said that he wasn't ready to let go of me and wanted to work on our issues. So after a lot of deliberation, he and I decided to give marriage counseling a try, but it didn't help. We would be doing perfectly fine during the sessions in the presence of our therapist, but as soon as we were out, it would be back to fighting, and it would feel like we were just wasting time during therapy sessions. We still didn't give up, though. We attended the sessions for almost a month until we finally called it quits. Because it just didn't make sense to keep attending the sessions and work everything out there, but continue to keep fighting in real life. He wasn't ready to accept that he was being a little too family-oriented for his own good and was forgetting that I was his family also, and I wasn't okay with living a life like that, where I would always come second. So both of us agreed that it would be for the best if we just separated. It sounds easy, but it was an incredibly difficult decision to make, and both of us were shattered that this was not going to work out. We filed for divorce mutually, and right now we are in the settlement phase. At this point, I don't even care what I get out of the divorce. I just want this to be over so I can move on with my life and pretend that this never happened. I have been looking into individual therapy for myself because it's really crazy what I'm dealing with here. And I really think I could do with help to process everything that's going on. My parents and my friends have been incredibly supportive, and I'm really grateful for it because they're the only people who are actually making it easier for me. I know lots of people are gossiping about me and how my marriage fell apart within less than a year, but I honestly don't even care. What matters is the people who I care about on my side and think that I did the right thing. As long as I have that, I'm not too worried about what happens in the future. I'm just going to work and focus on myself now. Sure, it's going to be a painful couple of months emotionally, but people have gone through worse and survived, and I'm hopeful for the future. Thank you so much for all the love and support that you guys have shown me. It means a lot to me. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo